Night shifts are different. The world feels emptier, quieter, and when you're alone in the quiet, you start to notice things, patterns, faces, sounds that don't belong. These are 3 true stories from people who work the graveyard shift, the hours when most people are asleep. In each case, someone working alone realizes too late they weren't as alone as they thought. This is the first story. I work night orders at a mid-tier hotel off Interstate 40. The shift runs 11 PM to 7 AM, and most nights it's just me, alone at the front desk, balancing accounts, running reports, restocking the lobby coffee. It's quiet work, boring mostly, until the night I realised the dead man had checked out of room 314. It was Tuesday in February, slow season. We had 18 rooms occupied out of 120. I'd been on shift for about 3 hours when the alert popped up on my computer. 2:47 AM, keycard access, room 314. I stared at the screen. Room 314 had checked out at 11:12 PM, over 3 hours ago, but the system was showing a new entry, same card, same room. I pulled up my security camera feed. We have cameras in every hallway, angled to cover the doors. I scrolled to camera 3, which covers the 3rd floor corridor where 314 is located. The hallway was empty. The door to 314 was closed. No one was visible in the frame. I assumed it was a system glitch. We've been having issues with the key card readers, cards that didn't work, doors that wouldn't unlock. I made a note for maintenance and went back to my spreadsheets. At 3:14 AM, it happened again. Same room, same card, another access alert. I checked the camera again, still empty, still no one there. Now, I was uneasy. I pulled up the guest record from 314. Thomas Brannan, age 69, a solo traveller. He checked in at 8:03 PM, checked out at 11:12 PM, paid cash, said he had an early flight and didn't want to wait until morning. But his card was being used after he left, and the cameras weren't picking up anyone. I called the housekeeping supervisor. She's on call for emergencies. She picked up on the 3rd ring, voice groggy. "Did you do a welfare check when he checked out?" she asked. "He came to the desk himself," I said. "He handed me the key card, said thank you. I saw him walk out the front door." There was a long pause on the line. Then, "Go to 314, right now, I'm on my way." I didn't want to go, but I grabbed the master key card and took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The hallway was silent, that middle of the night silence that feels like it's pressing against your eardrums. I walked to 314, my footsteps too loud on the thin carpet. The door was slightly ajar. I hadn't seen that on the camera. I pushed it open with my foot, keeping my hands free, and I flipped the light switch. The room was dark, the blackout curtains were drawn, and there was someone in the bed. I stepped closer. I pulled back the covers. Thomas Brannan was lying on his back, fully clothed, arms at his sides. His skin was grey, his eyes were half open, clouded and dull, and he was cold. Not just cool, cold, the kind of cold that means he's been dead for hours. I backed out of the room, hands shaking, and I called 911. The police arrived within 10 minutes. The coroner came an hour later. They confirmed what I already knew. Thomas Brannan had died sometime between 10 and 11 PM. Probable heart attack. He'd been dead for at least 4 hours by the time I found him. But that's not the part that keeps me up at night. The detective pulled me aside while they were photographing the scene. He asked, "Who checked him out?" "He did," I said. "I saw him. He stood right in front of me at the desk. He handed me his key card and said he had an early flight." The detective looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "Show me the footage." We went back to the lobby and I pulled up the security feed from the front desk camera. The timestamp showed 11:12 p.m. I appeared on the screen, standing behind the desk, and I was talking, but there was no one in front of me. The footage showed me looking at empty air, smiling, nodding, reaching out and taking something from nothing. I processed the checkout on the computer, put a key card in the return box, and then I turned and went back to my paperwork. There was no one there, just me, talking to no one. "I don't understand," I said. My voice sounded far away. "He was standing right there. I saw him." The detective didn't say anything. He just kept watching the footage. Later, the coroner finished his examination. He found Thomas Brannan's wallet in his pants pocket, his ID, his credit cards, and his room key still on him. He never checked out. He died in that room, alone, hours before I thought I saw him. So the card I put in the return box, the one that kept logging entries to room 314 at 2:47 a.m. and 3:14 a.m. Where did it come from? The housekeeping supervisor took it to maintenance. They ran the magnetic strip through the reader. It was a blank card, no guest name, no checkout date, just the room number, 314, programmed over and over again. And it wasn't one of our cards. The logo was wrong, the plastic was thicker. It looked like it had been made somewhere else and brought in. I asked the detective what he thought happened. He closed his notebook and said, "I think you checked out a dead man, and I think something wanted to make sure you knew." I quit 2 weeks later, but sometimes, late at night, I still think about the footage, about the way I smiled and nodded at empty air, about the way I reached out and took a key card that shouldn't have existed. And I think about the question no one wanted to ask me. If Tom and Brannan died at 10 p.m, who was I talking to at 11:12 p.m? Night shifts play tricks on you, the isolation, the exhaustion. You start seeing things that aren't there, hearing sounds that don't exist, or at least, that's what you tell yourself. But not every strange sound is a trick. Not every shadow is your imagination. Sometimes, the reason you feel watched is because you are. And sometimes, the person watching has been there longer than you think. I work night shift at a distribution centre in Ohio. It's a massive building, 200 square feet, 40-foot ceilings, rows and rows of industrial shelving stacked with pallets. My shift runs 10 p.m. to 6 a.m, and most nights, I'm alone. The company doesn't like to pay for multiple people on the overnight, so it's just me, restocking, running inventory, moving pallets with the forklift. It's quiet work, the kind of quiet that makes every sound echo. The hum of the overhead lights, the creak of the metal shelving, the scrape of your boots on the concrete. You get used to it. Until the night I heard the forklift start on its own. It was 1:30 a.m. I was in aisle 3, checking serial numbers on a pallet of electronics, and that's when I heard it. The low diesel rumble of a forklift engine starting up. The sound was coming from aisle 12, about 150 feet away. I stopped, listened. The engine was running, steady, unmistakable. But I was the only person in the building, and I had the only set of keys. I walked towards the sound, my boots loud on the concrete. When I got to aisle 12, I stopped. The forklift was running. The forks were raised to about 30 feet, right at the height of the top shelf. And there was no one in the driver's seat. I stood there for a few seconds, trying to make sense of it. The keys were in the ignition, the engine was idling, but no one was there. I walked closer and I shut off the engine. The silence that followed felt too loud. I looked up at the top shelf where the forks were positioned. There was supposed to be a pallet there, pallet 4472, electronics, high value inventory, but the space was empty. The pallet was gone. I checked the floor below. No pallet, no debris, no sign of it being moved. I pulled out my radio and I tried calling my supervisor. No answer. He doesn't work nights, and the emergency line goes straight to voicemail after hours. I finished my shift, but I kept looking over my shoulder, kept listening for sounds that didn't belong. At 3:45 a.m, I took my break in the small office at the front of the warehouse. There's a security monitor in there, 4 grainy black and white cameras covering different sections of the building. I sat down with my sandwich and watched the feeds while I ate. Camera 3 covers aisle 12, and that's when I saw it. A figure, walking behind the shelving. Slow, deliberate, not running, not hiding, just walking. I dropped my sandwich and I ran. By the time I got to aisle 12, there was no one there. I checked every row, every corner, calling out, "I know you're here, I'm calling the cops." Nothing. I searched the whole warehouse, section by section. Most of it was empty. But when I got to aisle 18, way in the back corner, where the lighting is bad, I found something. Behind the pallet of shrimp wrap boxes, tucked into the shadows, was a nest. A sleeping bag, dirty and worn, food wrappers scattered around, granola bars, beef jerky, empty water bottles, a small duffel bag with clothes spilling out, and next to it, a spiral notebook. I picked it up and I opened it. The pages were filled with names, shift schedules, routines. My name was there, Nate Collins, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m, solo, takes break at 3:30 to 4 a.m, leaves truck unlocked. There were other names in there too, other shifts, day workers, evening crew, dates going back months. At the bottom of the page, underlined twice, forklift key on ring, aisle 12, bay 7, electronics. I heard footsteps behind me, heavy boots, deliberate, close. I spun around. There was someone standing there, maybe 20 feet away, backlit by the overhead light. I couldn't see a face, but I could see the shape. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark hoodie. They didn't move, didn't run, just stood there, watching. I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I got to my truck, locked the doors and called 911. The police arrived 20 minutes later. They found the nest, the notebook, the food wrappers, but whoever had been there was gone. The officer flipped through the notebook, his face getting more serious with every page. "How long do you think he's been here?" I asked. He looked at me. "The dates in this thing go back 6 months. 6 months? Someone had been living in that warehouse, watching us, learning our routines, studying when we were alone, for half a year." The cop kept flipping pages. Then he stopped, looked up. "They've been watching all of you, every shift, every person who works here. They know when you're alone." I quit the next day, but here's the thing I can't stop thinking about. The forklift, the missing pallet, the person on the security camera, walking through aisle 12 like they owned the place. They'd been there for 6 months. They knew the building better than I did. They knew my routine. They knew when I took a break. They knew I left my truck unlocked. And the thing that scares me the most, they could have hurt me at any time. They could have waited until I was in the back corner, away from the cameras, alone. But they didn't. They moved the forklift. They moved the pallet. They let me see them on camera. It was like they wanted me to know they were there, and I still don't know why. The scariest thing about working nights isn't the isolation, it's the realization that isolation is an illusion. Someone is always watching, someone is always waiting, and sometimes they've been planning for a long time. The last story is about a pattern, something that started small and built over weeks, and by the time the person in this story realised what was happening, it was almost too late. I worked the overnight shift at a 24-hour diner on Highway 52. The shift runs 11 PM to 7 AM, and Wednesday nights are the slowest. Most nights, it's just me and the cook until 3 AM when he leaves. After that, it's just me and the dishwasher, a high school kid who wears headphones and keeps himself in the back. The customers are predictable, truckers stopping for coffee, late shift factory workers grabbing breakfast before heading home, occasionally a drunk driver who shouldn't be on the road. You learn to read people fast in this job. You learn who's harmless and who isn't. But the man who came in at 1:47 AM that Wednesday, I didn't know how to read him. He was in his early 30s, clean cut, wearing a button-down shirt and khakis, like he'd just come from an office job. He walked in, looked around, and sat in the corner booth in my section. I grabbed the menu and I walked over. "What can I get you?" I asked. He looked up at me, smiled. "Just water. I'm waiting for someone." I brought him water and I left him alone. It's not unusual for people to wait for friends or co-workers. I figured his person would show up soon. By 2:30 AM, he was still there. He hadn't touched the water, hadn't pulled out his phone. He just sat there, staring out of the window. I walked over again. "Is your friend coming soon? Kitchen closes at 3. He looked at me, that same smile. "They'll be here, don't worry about me." Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. It wasn't threatening, it wasn't rude, but it felt wrong. At 3:15 AM, the cook left. I was alone up front, except for the dishwasher in the back. And the man in the corner booth was still there, still watching. At 3:30 AM, I refilled coffee for a trucker in another section. As I walked past the corner booth, I realised the man wasn't looking out the window anymore. He was looking at me, and that's when I recognised him. I'd seen him before, not in the diner, outside my apartment complex 2 weeks ago. He'd been standing by the mailboxes, watching me walk to my car. I noticed him because he didn't move when I looked at him. He just stood there. And again, 4 days later, in the grocery store parking lot, he'd been sitting in the car with the engine off, staring at the entrance when I came out. I thought it was weird, but I convinced myself I was being paranoid. But now he was here, in my section, at 3:30 in the morning, when I was alone. I went to the back office, locked the door, and I called the police, the non-emergency line. "Is he threatening you?" the dispatcher asked. "No," I said, "but he won't leave, and I've seen him following me." "We'll send an officer, 10 to 15 minutes. I went back to the front. The corner booth was empty. I looked out of the window. His car was still in the parking lot, a dark sedan parked under a broken streetlight, but he wasn't in it. My heart started pounding. I checked the men's bathroom, empty. I checked the front door, locked. I locked it after the cook left, like I always do. Then I heard it. The back door, the one that leads to the alley behind the diner. It was open, propped with a cinder block. I didn't prop it. I never do. I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around, my breath catching. It was the dishwasher. He'd taken off his headphones and was staring at me. "Are you okay? You look freaked." "Did you see the guy in the corner booth leave?" I asked. He shook his head. "What guy? I've been in the back all night." The police arrived 5 minutes later. By then, the man's car was gone. The officer checked the security camera. We only have one, grainy, black and white, covering the register. The footage showed the man sitting in the corner booth, but his face was turned away from the camera the entire time. I couldn't see his features, just the back of his head. When I walked to the back office, he stood up, and instead of walking towards the front door, he moved towards the back hallway, towards the kitchen, towards me. "He went towards you," the officer said quietly. "The back door was propped open," I said. "Did you prop it?" "No." The officer went outside and checked the back door handle. He came back a minute later, frowning. "No fingerprints. It's been wiped clean." He told me to be careful, to call if the man came back, to consider changing my shifts. As he was leaving, I walked to the back corner booth to clear the table. The water glass was still full, untouched, but underneath it was a folded napkin. I picked it up and I opened it. Written in blue pen, in neat handwriting, were 7 words. "You work too late. It's not safe." I quit the next day. I didn't give notice. I just didn't show up. But here's what I can't stop thinking about. The napkin, the handwriting, the way he said, "I'm waiting for someone." He wasn't waiting for a friend. He wasn't waiting for a co-worker. He was waiting for me. Waiting for the moment when I'd be alone, when the cook would leave, when there'd be no one to hear me scream. And the scariest part? I don't think that Wednesday was the first time he'd been there. I think he'd been coming for weeks, learning my schedule, watching when I worked, figuring out when I was most vulnerable. And I think the only reason he left that night, the only reason he didn't do whatever he was planning, was because I called the police. But I also think about the note. "You work too late. It's not safe." It sounded like a warning, but it felt like a promise. Stay safe out there. Lock your doors, trust your gut, and if you're working alone tonight, maybe turn on all the lights. Thanks for listening. Subscribe if you enjoyed.